Hi, in this video, we're going to take a look at the Microsoft Power Platform Hub. So basically, this is a SharePoint communication site template, and it involves some PowerShell, and we can set up a handy hub, and then we'll take a sneak peek at the outcome of doing this. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to come to aka.ms/pphub-download. That will initiate the download of the zip file that ultimately contains a PowerShell script. So once we have downloaded that somewhere, we'll then come into PowerShell. Just to call out, you will want to ensure that you're using PowerShell version 5.1 dot something. You can check the version of PowerShell by doing $PS version table, and then we can see here under PS version with 5.1 dot something. That should be fine. I would prefer to be using PowerShell 7, but I don't think it would work with this as per the 5.1 prerequisite. And I'm using ISE here, and I've ensured that I'm running it as an administrator. We then need to ensure that we have two modules in place, which we can do by utilizing the install-module command. So the first one is microsoft.powerapps.administration.powershell. The second is pmp.powershell. Now that we have those two, I'm now going to open up a file that was within zip file that we just downloaded. However, if you open from ISE, it will initially be targeting just those .ps1 or .psm1 files, so basically PowerShell files that are a type associated with PowerShell. However, because ours is in a zip file, we'll go to the location. I'm doing this in File Explorer. If you can't see it, I'm going to locate our Power Platform Hub zip file. We're going to extract it. We're then going to launch into the extracted file, and we are going to open up, just make sure I get the right file. We're going to open up the deploy-powerplatformhub.ps1 file. So I'm just going to do that now. So here we can see deploy powerplatformhub.ps1. There's some variables that we'll need to change. So I'm just going to go through and do that now. So for the first one, admin tenant name, that's going to be basically your root SharePoint site. So whatever your tenant name.sharepoint.com is. So we're going to put Power Platform Philips for us. The next one, company name, your organization name. This will surface itself in the templates page navigation as the title and sample pages. So for this, we'll just put Platform Philips. The next is the language. Locale, we should be fine with 1033, which is English United States. One day there may even be an English United Kingdom. New site URL, we can replace the Power Platform Hub with basically our chosen URL. However, I am just going to leave it as Power Platform Hub. Owner email, I'll do that as our administrator account. Site template we'll leave as is. Site title I'm going to leave as is. And then we've got time zone. So again, in the description, I will reference the Microsoft documentation that walks through this. And within there's a link to available time zones. So I'm just going to go to there and ensure that I can choose GMT. So with that loaded, there'll be an associated number. So 2 equates to UTC, Dublin, Edinburgh, Lisbon, and London, which is what we're after. So we'll leave that as 2. We'll now run this PowerShell script. So I'm just going to do the play icon, or similarly, we could do F5. We'll click OK, and we'll see how it gets on. On another screen, I am being prompted to log in, so I'm just going to log in with our administrator account. So it's worth calling out, you will need to have sufficient permissions to the services to which we're making changes, namely SharePoint Online for the most part. Just going to authenticate. And I now need to specify an MFA code. And we'll enter the code. And verify. It's going to prompt us for a PMP management shell list of permissions, of which I'm going to consent on behalf of the organization and accept, because if we were to not accept, that would be the end of this. So now we've authenticated, it should be happy to go about its business. There is a second PowerShell script that's in the zip file we downloaded as well, which is set Power Platform Hub as DLP error setting.ps1. So what I'm going to do here is we'll open that up whilst that's still thinking about it. And we can see here that we'll want to change these environment variables as well based on where we're setting up the hub site, although we have just got an error there. So I'll just set these variables and then we'll troubleshoot that error. So Power Platform, powerplatformphillips.sharepoint.com, blah, blah, blah. Support email, I'll do that as our administrator. Phillips.uk. I'm going to assume tenant ID is Azure AD tenant. So for that, I'm going to come on over to portal.azure.com. And we'll go to Azure Active Directory. Once this is loaded, we'll copy the tenant ID. That we can get to with overview selected. So tenant ID, we'll come back into PowerShell and I'm going to paste that here. Okay, so let's come back to this error and work through it. So it looks like it created the new site, it connected to it, and then it deployed. However, this could just be a race condition. Template deployment failed with error, file not found, no match was found for the specified search criteria and module name. Try get PS repository to see all available, unable to find. Okay, we installed the module. Let's try and just ensure that that module is available for use. So I'm just, although I'm pretty sure that should be Microsoft.Power Apps and not Power App, but I'll go with it. No, it's not happy. So then we'll put in the S to make it correct. Okay, and what we'll do now, the only problem here is that it probably has done some of this. So let's just have a look. So info connecting SharePoint Online, check if site exists. Okay, we might be able to run it again if it can. It looks like it can handle if it already exists. So let's play this again. We'll see how far we get this time. Essentially, we need to run this, and then we need to run the other one. Let's just have a sneak peek of the other script. So what is this fundamentally doing? So add Power Apps Connect, just get a connection, and new Power App data loss prevention error settings, tenant error setting. So it looks like this is basically going to use this new hub site as a URL should there be a DLP error that will give users something a bit more fluffy than perhaps the usual. So it's still not happy with this. I'm going to work through this error. I'm going to pause up for a second and then we'll come back and I'll explain what I did to resolve. Okay, short of specifying it explicitly, looking at this error and the point in which it failed, I think it ultimately failed when it got to the point of, so it did create the site, but when it was actually trying to apply the template file, so we've got template.pmp, that's not an explicit path, so it's probably looking to find template.pmp within our current directory, which is not. So I'm just going to change directory to ultimately the extracted downloaded zip file location, and then I'm going to try and execute it again, and hopefully this should be enough for it to find the PMP template file. So it's going to create the new site, which is creating new site here, which does new PMP tenant site. So all that must have occurred successfully because it gets to the point of wait 15 seconds to make sure your site is ready. But then you'll see that the next bit is where it actually comes to deploy the template. So it must be the PMP site template that failed. Although a lot of the error does seem to be complaining about the module, which threw me. So this might not do it, but it seems as good a place to start as any. So now we're on to the wait 15 seconds. You could, of course, run through this systematically and execute the commands and check what certain variables are populated with to troubleshoot as well. So it would be quite handy. So we've got to the point of deploying template, which we did get to before, but this is the point at which we got the error. However, now, because we're within the directory where PMP template does exist, we could have explicitly defined it here as well. It is now able to apply the PMP template over the site that it's just created based on the variables that we populated at the top. So I'm just going to pause this whilst it goes through doing this because it might take a while. Okay, so now that it's completed successfully, I'm just going to make a copy of this URL. We're going to execute this second one now that we've populated what should be sufficient variables. So we'll click play. Okay. This time it's going to want me to authenticate to Power Platform, so I'll just go with our administrator account. And that seems to have all run fine. So now let's take a look at what we've got. So I'm going to paste in that URL. And this will take us to our communication site that's had the template applied to it. Okay, now the site's loaded, let's take a look at what we've got. So it's got some good general information just about the Power Platform in general, success stories, events, that's quite nice. Although possibly if this is giving internal suggestions, you would want to go to the underlying. Let's just go to site contents a second and see what we've got. So you would want to come to events and populate that with your own events. Let's go back to home. He says, just do it that way. Let's have a look at the navigation. So we've got the getting started, help and learning, environments, data loss prevention policies, moving, requesting a premium license, news, events. So let's have a look at some of these environments. So here we get a bit of information about what environments are, information around the default environment, Dataverse, data loss prevention policies. Let's have a look at requesting a premium license. Okay, so a lot of this is skeleton for you to fill in, but it at least gives you an idea and a starter for 10. So we'll leave it there. But if you ever do want to have a look at this and have a play yourself, again, in the description, I'll put a link to Microsoft's documentation, which, to be honest, you can follow. The reason I like to do these videos is because sometimes, with my experience of working with Microsoft products, and they do a very good job, considering how much they've got to do documentation on, they sometimes fall a bit short of the mark. So I like to play it out, and you can do it that way. Just for example, like when we went to run the PowerShell, you can know how to figure it out if you've got the experience. But if you just did it, black and white, what they've said, it doesn't at any point say, unless I skipped over it, I must admit I'm not really a manual reader, ensure that you're within the directory of where the template file is. Maybe it does, but I didn't read that bit. Okay, thank you for watching.